Hi, I'm Diane McGarry with Drake at Arts. With me today are co-host Tom McGarry, author Peter Clenott, and ASL interpreter Connie. Peter was born in Portland, Maine, and graduated from Bowdoin College. He has been writing for half a century. I love that.
Yeah.
After his college exam in May 1973, he went out into the student lounge with a notebook and several sharpened pencils and eraser and began to write. In 2009, Hunting the King was published by a Canadian firm, and subsequently, Devolution and The Hunted were published. The Unwanted came out in 2021, and its sequel, The Unfounded, is being published. Well, actually, it probably was just published, wasn't it?
Actually, what happened is I wrote another novel, which I'm going to read from today, called The Murder and Investigation of Adolf Hitler.
Oh, right.
That's coming out in December, so we've postponed The Unfound to next year.
Oh, that's right.
Oh,
That's right. You told me about that earlier. I'm sorry, Peter. I forgot.
That's all right.
I just love how prolific you are. It's great. Peter has three kids and currently lives in Haverhill with his son, Stephen. He works for Community Teamwork in Lowell, and right now he's working to rewrite a global novel, but he's going to tell you all about this because I'm going to get it mixed up again. Anyway, we're looking forward to everything you can share with us today, Peter. This is great.
Thank you. Well, the impetus for the current group of novels was my grandfather, who was a Harvard grad, Harvard Law School grad. And at the end of World War II, he was a prosecutor of Nazis.
Oh, wow.
While he was there, he had an affair with a German woman that produced a daughter, a much younger half sister to my mother. I suppose it would be interesting to meet her. I've never tried that genealogical experiment to see if I could find the family that I probably have in Germany. My mother and grandmother did not want this woman to bring her child over, so we never met. So as you said earlier, I've been writing for 50 years, not overly successful, as you can tell, or I would be in Hawaii or someplace writing full
Fun.
time.
April's nice.
But a few years ago, I decided to go back and try to publish something that is more marketable. Writing a novel is one thing. Marketing, I think, as you probably know, is extremely difficult. So I returned to something I had written back in the 1990s that involved a Jewish attorney in Nuremberg, uh, responsible for prosecuting a Nazi war criminal, falling in love with his daughter, which was done as a screenplay. But back around 2021, I decided to write a novel. If you watch PBS, you see a lot of mysteries that are set in Europe. Those are very popular. So I thought to set, a series of mysteries in Munich, Germany, before, during, and after World War II, which is what this series is about. But it set me, I had to start researching. And I started by researching the Nuremberg trials. And I discovered things that I hadn't known before, which set the course of this series completely on a different path. I learned that in September of 39, just as the Germans were invading Poland, they had a program, Life Unworthy of Life, where if you had a child or a member of your family who had a physical or mental handicap, you could voluntarily refer them to a clinic, or your psychiatrist or physician could refer them to a clinic where rather than getting treated, they would be euthanized. So the Germans were euthanizing their own children, using the gas that they ultimately used in the concentration camps, experimenting with their own children first. Your children would go to this clinic, then a few weeks later they would die of leukemia or some other malnutrition, something else. The Germans were basing this actually on philosophies or theories in the United States in the 30s, eugenics, where people didn't want to pass bad genes onto their future generations. So the Germans carried it to a much higher level. So out of this was born Hannah Ziegler, who is the main character of the first novel that came out, The Unwanted. That novel opens up with her as a 14-year-old girl who's being taken by her grandfather and her psychiatrist to a euthanasia center to be euthanized. I also learned that there was a group for young girls in Germany, their version of the Nazi youth, but for girls, who were expected to be the perfect Aryan female, mother, daughter, sister, helpmate, but also know how to shoot a gun, load a rocket launcher, all this. And out of that came a young girl named Silke Hartenstein, who's 16, blonde, gorgeous, the cover girl for Nazi propaganda magazines, the complete opposite of who Hannah Ziegler is. But the novel really is based around the friendship that develops between these two young women and a murder that occurs. Where you don't know the answer. So if anybody is lucky enough to get the novel, don't skip ahead. The answer is in the last sentence. The publisher is a small publisher of mysteries, Level Best Books out of Maryland. They publish a lot of mysteries. So they wanted me to write a follow-up to the novel. So I did write something called The Unfound, which is about how many Nazis escaped Germany and got their way to Argentina, with Hannah being one of the main characters and a detective, Avi Chrysler, being the other one. At that point, the publisher then said, well, do you have a third? So I decided to write a third novel, which is actually takes place in 1931. And I liked it so much, I decided, what can we publish this one first and push The Unfound off to next year? So they agreed to do that. So what's coming out in December is the murder investigation of Adolf Hitler. Now, this is based on a true story. Again, I learned a lot through doing research. When I was in college, I didn't study at all. There's no point in going to college. I went without any idea where I was going, and I graduated without any idea where I was going. But in 1931, the backdrop to this story, Hitler is powerful, but he's not yet the power of the land. He's not going to become Chancellor of Germany for 2 more years, 1933, when President Hindenburg dies. At this point in history, things are a little shaky for Hitler. He's treading a thin line. He's trying to court the wealthy industrialists of Germany. He wants his party to be seen as legitimate. But there's a lot of violence that's going on. The brown shirts and the communists have these street battles. There's a lot of violence going on, and Hitler kind of wants to distance himself from that violence. In the spring of 31, a murder occurs, part of a battle between the brown shirts and the communists. And the murderers, Hitler's followers, are brought to trial. A Jewish prosecutor named Hans Litten had the bravery to subpoena Hitler and bring him to trial to testify. What he wanted to do was to draw a parallel to say, Hitler, your speeches are causing this violence. You're as guilty of the murders as the people who actually perpetrated them. Certainly, we can look at what's going on today and see similarities. So this Jewish prosecutor brings Hitler before the trial and spends hours cross-examining him. Hitler is fortunate that the judge is fairly lenient, but it's clear from the publicity that Hitler gets out of this that he's lied on the stand and there's a problem. So Hitler is still in a shaky position. When in this year he moves into a luxury apartment in Munich, he has the entire floor. His sister Anna comes in to be the housekeeper, and she brings in her daughter Angela Raubel, Gelly Raubel, Hitler's niece, who is half his age. Hitler falls madly in love with Gelly, and we've all heard of Eva Braun. We know that she and Hitler were together for many years and eventually committed suicide. But the love of Hitler's life was Gelly Raubel. My son, Stephen, goes to a shared living farm, and the person who runs the farm is a woman who was born in Germany, but she didn't even know this story. Hitler falls madly in love with Gelly, and Gelly is 22. She's a product of the Weimar Germany. She'll have affairs. She has an affair with Hitler's chauffeur, which causes Hitler to fire the chauffeur. She's outgoing, and I think Hitler likes that. He likes being seen with a pretty young woman out on the street, it's good for his publicity, although he's not very masculine in that way. And as far as Gally is concerned, we don't know what their sexual relationship was. We only know that Gally did tell friends that he makes me do disgusting things. But Gally, on the other hand, may want to marry him. After all, he's famous, he's powerful. They go to the theater, they go to fancy restaurants. Hitler loves to go shopping with her and buy her whatever she wants. But he's got her on a tight leash. He can't have a normal sexual relationship with her, but he preferred her not to have any kind of life outside of what he dictates. So there's friction between them. And in September of 1931, they have an argument. The following morning, the housing staff, the maids, the butler, have to break in her door, her bedroom door, which is locked from inside. They find her dead of a gunshot wound. Hitler's people come in, they rush in, including Rudolf Hess, who people may be familiar with, and they make it out to be a suicide. The word gets out, it's a suicide, it's an unfortunate thing, but that's what it is. Police come in, no autopsy is done. They do find, they rule that it's a suicide, but it's clear from the report that they write that it's not a suicide. The angle of the gunshot is down through the chest, through the lungs, and the bullet ends up lodged in the hip, but never exits. You don't commit suicide by shooting yourself like this. There was a letter found on a writing desk in which she was preparing happily a trip to Austria. Some people believe that she was pregnant, and that might have been the problem. The Nazis, Hitler's people, at some point say, well, no, let's not call it a suicide, let's call it an accident, because Gally's Catholic. If it's ruled a suicide, she can't be buried in a Catholic cemetery. But it's too late. The word has gotten out that it's a suicide. The communist newspapers come out saying, no, with headlines saying no suicide, murder. So there are some attempts at that point to bring Hitler back to trial, to try him for murder. So the basis of this story is the investigation of what happened. And the main character is this Avi Chrysler, who is a detective, plays a smaller role in the Unwanted, but he's Jewish. He's a part of the Munich police force, and he knows right off the bat that this is not a suicide. But what can he do? The police say it's a suicide. The defense ministry all says it's a suicide, and that's the way it has to be. In the scene, at some point, he is brought in by the editor of a communist newspaper who invites him and says, "You get the information on this case. We'll bring him to trial. If we can bring him down, we'll bring the whole Nazi party down." So that's the basis of the story. Now, the scene that I was going to read from, I don't know how much time I have. I don't want it to be too long, but it's a scene where Chrysler and one of his lady friends, Lottie Leinsdorf, are going to Gally Raubel's funeral in Vienna. Part of the story, when I write a novel, I don't like it to be just this typical mystery where you have a murder, the detective, the suspects, and the whole point of the novel is just figuring out who did it. There's a lot more depth. You'll learn a lot, I think, and I think you'll appreciate the relationship. For example, you'll appreciate Avi, the detective, and the two women in his life. Lottie, who will be in this scene, is the single daughter of a wealthy German couple who want to marry her off to a Nazi bigwig, and she doesn't want that. Avi also has a relationship with a woman named Annie Leuenberg, who is a journalist for the communist newspaper. There's a lot going on behind the scenes. But in the scene that I'll read to you, it's Avi and Lottie going to the funeral of Gally Raubel, Hitler's niece, and Hitler, of course, is there with his hand-picked following. So that's what I would read. It's about 11 pages. It may be too long. So if you need to cut me off, just cut me off as I'm reading.
We have about 45 minutes. Sounds like it might fit.
All right. Do you want me to start?
Go for it.
Yes.
Please.
All right. I've cut it back a little bit. Chrysler has to consult a map of the cemetery to locate the funeral. And Hitler obviously didn't restrict her purse for her eldest daughter. An intimate crowd is gathered around Plot 9 near their Lugerkirche, a beautiful church in the very center of one of the largest cemeteries in the world. Whether or not it is meant as a slap in the face to her half-brother, Anne Hitler is telling the world that her child was someone special, who belonged, spending eternity with the most notable of Austrians. The Hitlers are not German, they're Austrian. Will Adolf end up in such a place? Not likely. Lottie maintains this restraining grip on Chrysler's arm as they take a path toward the church. She preferred not to be spotted and become the central focus of everyone's attention. This is Gelly Raubel's day, her last one above ground. Are you sure you want to talk to Hitler? Will he even let you? She wonders, gripped by worry. Look at the architecture of the church. Middle Eastern influence, I think. St. Peter's meets ancient Egypt. That's not an answer. No, but it's my inn. A flowered circular plaza fronts the church. Gelly's funeral is being conducted beneath trees to Chrysler's right, a much more sumptuous and dignified setting than the one he had provided for Clara Fries. Hitler is essentially a very lonely man, a misfit. He knows it. He tries to hide it, but he lives in fear of being found out. Herr Freud, just saying, there's a human surviving within the monster. Can you befriend the man who killed his niece? Chrysler breaks professional detective guise briefly to give Lottie a kiss on the cheek and a hug around the waist. Well, he says, maybe there's a monster surviving within this human. He starts forward, bringing Lottie with him. The backs of the mourners are to him, a line of SS and SA guards at the very rear, competing even here for Hitler's favor. Chrysler took the time that morning to dress his mournful best. Lottie is a sight in black. Even so, they garner suspicious looks as they break ranks and push into the small gathering of Nazi dignitaries. Hitler himself, wedged in between the photographer Hoffman and his chauffeur Schreck, seems distracted and catches sight of the interlopers. Stay with me, Chrysler whispers to Lottie. We'll be safer together. Safer? I thought you said. Few of the gathered are paying attention to Father Pant as he intones a prayer. Oh, Angela, may the Lord embrace you passionately in his palm until we meet again in paradise. How can any of these people say they believe in God, Chrysler wonders, when what they truly worship is power? They're not saying goodbye to a fellow human being, a lamb of God. They're working their way up the ranks of authority in the hopes of becoming gods themselves. Perhaps there's an elaborate lunch prepared for her after the service, either in the church or elsewhere nearby. Hitler's men are probably quite hungry, and hunger always transcends compassion. Hitler's no role model for them, fidgeting, restless, longing no doubt to be away as quickly as possible, back to the political grind, the exciting, ego-indulging rallies. He'll be haunted by Gelly Raubel's death for some time, but not forever. Chrysler intends to intercept the man he assumes is Gelly's killer on the way back to his Mercedes. With Lottie in tow, he figures he can get close enough to identify himself, point out the beautiful architecture of the church, and grab a few moments to speak to the would-be Chancellor of Germany. He is, in fact, maneuvering his way through the clot of uniformed Nazi henchmen, when for some reason his attention is diverted. Perhaps it's the cigarette smoke, puffed into his face by an SA guard that causes him to turn his head. In that moment, he catches sight of something that immediately has his guard up. A young man, quite out of place, is moving like a Semitic shark through enemy Aryan waters. What a fool, Chrysler thinks. Wearing a yarmulke, no less, at a Nazi funeral. Is the man crazy? Is he suicidal? Does he want to end up right beside Gelly Raubel? Then it hits him. Abrupt and stupefying. This man is not out of place at all. Stay here, Lottie, he orders. Why? Where are you going? That man over there. He's carrying a pistol. How could you tell? Chrysler doesn't have time to explain that this man, perhaps in his early 20s, has his right hand thrust inside a coat pocket. The arm is trembling, but there's the look on the man's face that tells Chrysler he has every intention of shooting Hitler. That's the father of Gelly's baby, he whispers, before abandoning her and moving to get to the young man before he can make the mistake of his life. Hitler's black-clad, red-armed band sentinels have noticed him too. Chrysler has one eye on them and one on the man he is certain fathered the doomed child of Gelly Raubel. Before they can tackle the assassin, Chrysler swoops in. Don't be an idiot, he says, latching onto the startled young man and forcing him back. I'm concerned about anyone he has to shove out of the way in order to move Gelly's Jewish lover out of harm's way. Let me go. Give me the gun. Chrysler doesn't care if the man obeys his order. Tightening his grip on the arm, he causes the man to cry out in pain and release the hidden weapon. Chrysler is able to grab it and hide it within his own coat before the first of the Nazi guards intervenes, ready to pummel the intruder. Who are you? Who are you? They shout. Violence their first instinct. Let us have this man. They're like cockroaches on the crust of a discarded piece of bread. Gelly's lever is thrown to the ground. Chrysler is pushed aside. The beatings begin. Fists, feet, boots, claws. It is Lottie's shout and intervention that causes the thugs to hesitate. But it is a shout from one of their own, Ernst Room, that makes them stop punching and kicking. Only then does Chrysler have the opportunity to show his Munich police credentials. I'm a cop. I have him. There are 2 Jewish cemeteries here. He probably just got lost. Even so, Room orders his men to search the bruised creature lying on the ground, now in tears, harmless as it turns out. They find no weapon on him. I've come to Vienna to pay my respects, Chrysler explains, to Herr Hitler and to his niece. I've been investigating her case. And this man, this Jew, nobody. I'll take care of him. Find out what he was doing here. You should return to the service. Herr Hitler, I'm sure, doesn't want any bad press coming out of this. Room is smart enough to pull his troops away, clever enough to put on a good show for anyone who thinks he is trying to challenge Hitler for leadership of the party. As soon as the SA and Himmler's SS have backed off and returned to the funeral, Chrysler pulls Gelly's lever to his feet, yanks the yarmulke off his head, tosses it to the ground, and stamps on it. Then he throws a mean punch to the young man's jaw before picking him up again. This is all for show, he says, speaking calmly. I'm Jewish, too. I could have hit you harder. That was a crazy thing you just tried to pull off. What crazy? He killed my Gelly. Keep your voice down. Chrysler maintains his act, dragging the man over to a stone bench and plopping him down. Your name, he says. What is it? Chaim Lerner. You're an actor? What? An actor? A singer? An actor. How did you know? Did you know Gelly? Chrysler looks around. Lottie is hurrying over, calling his name. It figures, that's all. You know Othello, I'll tell you that. What? Shakespeare, for the love of God. Lottie comes up breathless, just in time to play Desdemona to learn his melodramatic, faded Moor. Avi, is he all right? What just happened? Those men. We're fine, Chrysler says, feeling the stolen pistol in his pocket. Did you really think you could get away with shooting Hitler in front of all these soldiers? He shakes Lerner for the benefit of those watching. I don't know. We were in love. She wanted to run away and come to Vienna so we could live together, have a family, raise a child. As a Jew, the cynic in Chrysler rises to the surface. He can see in the soft look in Lottie's face that she buys Lerner's desperate, demented wish. Look, you're lucky I was here, Chrysler says. I'm telling you, frankly, it wouldn't have worked out. Not that I doubt your sincerity. Gelly was coming. She was coming. Lerner shouts to the point that Chrysler has to smack him across the face. The SA only meters away. I swear it, he claims with much lowered voice, to Semmering, to meet me there. She was really going to leave him this time. That's why he killed her. So far, only a theory, Chrysler says. A girl such as Gelly Robel does not marry a Jew. But a point is made that intrigues him. He feels the pistol hidden inside his coat. There's a small revolver, not like that Hitler's Walther that was discovered in Gelly's room, presumably the murder weapon. Did Gelly know how to use a gun, he asks. She was learning. She was afraid of the violence in Munich, and she felt needed protection. She used a Walther? I don't know. Or something like this. Chrysler indicates the weapon in his pocket, a woman's weapon. Yes, more like that, Lerner says. I bought it for her. I don't know names. Unlike this actor, Chrysler is a pro at hiding his emotions. He'll give nothing away, but his excitement is building. She owned her own gun? Yes, 2 of them. One I gave her, one I think Hitler gave her. Then there was no need for her to leave her bedroom, travel to Hitler's room, steal his gun, and use that to shoot herself when she had her own, more convenient suicide device. It makes no sense. Sauer and Forster left this out of their final report to Justice Minister Gertner. Chrysler curses himself for not having had the opportunity to do more thorough search of her room. Sauer and Forster took over that responsibility before he or Fritz Lange could explore her drawers or closet. Not that Lange would have been any more ethical. If the other detectives did their job, then maybe they discovered the weapon that Gelly would have used if she truly intended on shooting herself. Those weapons would now be iron fragments in some Munich scrap heap. She liked shooting, Lerner adds. She told me she was getting very good at target practice. So presumably, had she shot herself, Chrysler thinks, she would have done a better job of it. He dismisses Lerner then, placing a hand on his back and pushing him away with an admonition to stay away from Hitler and to live a longer life. To Lottie, he says, Glaser will like this. Hitler's gun was at the crime scene. The only person who would have brought it was Hitler himself. Probably, but not Positively, Lottie argues back. Who else in the household had access to his gun? What are you, his attorney? Chrysler's attention is turned back to the service, which is breaking up. The important thing is she had other pistols at her disposal to shoot herself. She didn't use those, but for some reason grabbed Hitler's weapon out of his room, brought it back to her own, locked the door so no one could get in, then shot herself. Why? To place the blame on him? To make him feel guilty, Lottie says. She's a woman, after all. That's what she would have done. You loved me, you discarded me, but you'll remember me forever in guilt. Hitler is leaving now. Everyone is heading towards the line of vehicles that brought them to the cemetery. The appearance and interrogation of Lerner was unplanned. It is Hitler Chrysler is here to see. With a brusque, let's go, he pulls Lottie along as he goes after the National Socialist leader before Gelly's uncle can make his escape. Herr Hitler, a word. Hitler is like a magnet drawing around him uniformed guards of the Sturmbataillon and the Schutzstaffel. Chrysler recognizes other Nazi luminaries. He had spotted Hess outside Prince Regenenplatz 16 on the day of Gelly's murder. Forming a brace around Hitler is Strasser, the Berlin party chief, and Himmler, formerly Strasser's underling, now leader of the Wehrmacht SS. Strasser is dressed as a civilian, Hitler in his full military regalia. Chrysler ignores them both. I apologize for the disruption, he says. I roughed up the Jew and sent him on his way. He was confused, lost, not worth a moment of your time, particularly on a day like this. Did you get his name? Himmler demands to know. I didn't think it mattered. Such a small man. Unlike the men protecting his flanks, Hitler seems disoriented. Is it possible he feels a modicum of guilt? Is it possible Gelly Raubel is a migraine headache pounding away inside his head? Is it possible, under the bewildering circumstances, he doesn't even remember Chrysler? Strasser attempts to hand Hitler a lit cigarette to calm his nerves, only to have Hitler lash out at him and knock the cigarette to the ground. You know better than that, Strasser, to hand me such poison. Hitler seems at least jarred out of his troubled reverie enough to notice Chrysler. Tobacco is the red man's vengeance upon us, Inspector, he says. We'll pass a law someday outlawing it. Strasser tries to apologize for the gaffe, but Hitler waves him off and strides towards his Mercedes. Chrysler grabs Lottie and follows, though it is hard to get a word in edgewise with all the retainers vying for position. At the open-air car, Hitler does pause. It is as if a thought has come to him at that moment. He does recall Chrysler, and he wants to make a point. The world we live in is mathematical, Inspector. Geometric, cubes, spheres, pyramids. You, as a former architectural student, will appreciate this. Spear does. Never one of my best subjects, though. Geometry. Straight lines I can draw. For the more complex work, I leave it to men like Speer, Strasser, if he stops smoking. Hitler climbs into the back of his Mercedes. You are making progress on the other case? The other case? Chrysler is thrown, not certain to what Hitler is referring. It was his intention to put Hitler in that awkward moment of vulnerability. Now surrounded by Jew haters, in intimate conference with their leader, he is not sure how to respond. You know the one I mean? To Chrysler's surprise, Hitler at that moment leans over and signals for the detective to come closer. They think I don't know that someone among my friends, someone here even today pretending to mourn my niece, is out to ruin me. I know better. I always know better. Find out who it is, Inspector. You'll be appropriately rewarded. Once Julia Schreck is behind the wheel and Himmler and Strasser have joined Hitler, the Mercedes leaves the cemetery. Chrysler doubts that Hitler will give his niece a second thought after this. He can't help notice the stares aimed his way by Hitler's henchmen, though. They will give him second and third thoughts, no doubt, especially if Lange tells them I've got Jewish blood. Can we go now? Hanging on his arm, Lottie pushes the hidden pistol up against his hip. This place scares me, she says. Her anxiety is obvious to Chrysler, her body reacting to the chill breeze of intimidation and fear that Hitler leaves in his wake. You were very brave. So were you. I was being a mother hen. Let's just get out of here. You must be hungry. I'm starved. Me too, he says. Trying to be the better actor, unfazed by what his life is becoming, he takes a final look at the resting place of a 23-year-old girl who should be on her way to a singing lesson or a dinner date with Chaim Lerner. He says, I never liked cemeteries, even less now. As they return to Lottie's automobile, they pass one of the Jewish sections of the Friedhof. It is a moment that, at some date in the future, Chrysler will recall as portentous. Like his father and his uncle, he has never given his religious heritage much thought. Amongst his own now, he feels history wrap around him. Ghosts of the past sleeping here now, waking up just to eye an unbeliever pass by. Or spirits of the future warning him that, distance himself from them as much as he does, the worst is yet to come.
Mm.
And that's it.
Wow. Mm.
And that's that.
That really evokes a different time and a vulnerable Hitler that we don't normally think of.
Well, Hitler was human, so he does appear as usually when you see him in film or books, it's Hitler in power. So
Mhm.
now we're getting to see Hitler before that, when he's rising and is still suspicious of everybody around him,
Mhm.
very paranoid. But you know, this is also a story of Chrysler, who, while a Jew, really rejects the religious part of his faith. His father was a soldier in the German army in World War One. People may not realize that many Jews fought for the German army in World War One and were even accorded medals of honor fighting for Germany. In fact, as Hitler was rising to power, many Jews tried to bring that up. Why are you punishing me? I'm a good German. I fought for this country. I was a patriot. Of course, it didn't help him at all.
Mm.
Um, so that's Avi's a cynic, and he's just trying to get through life. He's an honest, honorable person, but he's not connected to anybody or anything, any religion, any political philosophy.
Mm.
So it's his story and the story of Lottie, who's trying to have a life and uh, trying to get Avi to fall for her more deep is as deeply as she's in love with him.
Mm.
While while he's engaged in a relationship with Annie Leuenberg, who's a tall, red-headed, he calls her his Jewish giraffe,
Mm.
who's a very passionate communist who is at the forefront whenever the communists are out on parade in Munich and facing the physical intimidation of the Nazis coming the other direction. She's right up front with a club. So it's beyond just a mystery of who done it. It's a story of people in a very dangerous time.
Are all the people historically, based actual people, even though this is like fiction about what they were thinking, or how much is it historically accurate?
The 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 background, of course, is accurate. Hitler's trying to come to power at
Yeah.
this time. People like Ernst Röhm, who was head of the Brown Shirts, and Gregor Strasser, who head of the Nazi Party in Berlin, were vying for power. They felt that Hitler's attempt to court the aristocracy was not what they were about. They were the National Socialists. They felt that he should be more for the working man. So there was which is ultimately led to the Kristallnacht when
Mm.
Hitler killed Röhm, Strasser, and others who felt would oppose him.
Mm.
So all the political figures, of course, are real, and the backstory is real. There was an attempt um, by a prosecutor named Glaser to get Hitler to trial. It never panned out. Um, but the fictional characters, Avi and Lottie and Annie and others, are fictional.
Mm.
Um, there was also actually the story opens with another murder, not Gally Raubel, but another person um, who was fictional. But there were attempts to blackmail Hitler at this time,
Mm.
also because people were somewhat aware of his peculiar sexual proclivities. Um, so there were attempts to buy him off. We want money, or this is going to go
Mm.
public. So that plays a little part in this as well. But you will see Avi again in the Unfound in the next novel. Hannah Ziegler, as I said earlier, is the main character in The Unwanted, but in future novels, I think Hannah and Avi are going to develop a very strong relationship. Fictional.
Yeah.
How far I take this, I don't know. I was very interested in doing my research recently that in 1940 and 1941, there were Jews who were interested in forming alliance with the Nazis.
Wow.
A group called the Stern Gang, um, who so much hated the British because the British controlled the Palestinian Mandate that they would have sided with the Nazis to defeat the British and then to create a kind of a fascist Jewish state on the Nazi lines. Um, so that was going on in the 1940s. So that may play a part in the novel that I haven't written yet.
Mm.
But so there's a lot of interesting things that I've learned through the research. And so when I write a novel, obviously you have to entertain. If you're not entertained, forget it. But at the same time, I think people will learn things in ways that they don't know, they recognize they're learning something. It's not like reading an Irving Stone novel or a Michener novel where you can see they did tons of research, but it's all there and it kind of drags the fiction story down. And this, hopefully, these are page starters that you'll enjoy reading. You'll try to figure out who did what and what's going to happen. But you'll also learn something that perhaps you didn't know. That's the point. So we can only hope.
Clearly, you learned a lot that you hadn't known before as well. And the freshness and the excitement of that lives when you talk about it.
Yeah, for whatever reason, when I got to college, I wasn't reading. I didn't read at all. I picked up my father was read paperbacks, Heinlein, Asimov, among others. So I actually got into science fiction, and that's what I got back into reading. What made me, after my last college exam, go out in the student lodge and start writing, I have no idea. I had no training in it. I didn't know what I was doing. And yeah, and perhaps that's part of the reason why it's taken me 50 years to get this far. But I enjoy learning. So I've gone from science fiction to now mostly I read historical fiction. And I'm reading now a nonfiction by Howard Zinn, who is a history professor at BU, who has an alternative history of America, which is very interesting. And Noam Chomsky, who wrote a book, The Fateful Triangle, which is about the relationship between the United States, the Jews, and the Palestinians. And that's also eye-opening for people who are totally pro-Israel and totally anti-Palestine. You should read that book. So yeah, I enjoy writing this. I enjoy getting into the characters. I didn't think I would write a series. I didn't want to get dragged into a situation where I was like an author who can only write one novel, and like Harry Potter. If she writes anything other than Harry Potter, nobody's going to read it. I wanted to be able to write anything, whatever I wanted, whatever subject. I wrote a novel, which I think actually may come out in 2026, called LIGEIA, which is another mystery, but it takes place in 1850 in the United States, and it revolves around the theory that Lincoln was not the first president of the United States to be assassinated. Zachary Taylor was. And LIGEIA, who is the main character of that novel, is a slave, one of Zachary Taylor's slaves. But she is a big fan of Edgar Allan Poe. So she and Poe get together to uncover the mystery of what happened to Zachary Taylor. So I'm all over the place. I've written a ghost story that takes place off the coast of Maine. I wrote a story called La Mignonne, which is about the Puerto Rican insurrection against the United States in the 1930s, culminating in the attempted assassination of Harry Truman. So it's a lot of stuff, but I'm still working for CTI, so it hasn't brought me any attention.
But it's all historical type stories that you're taking off. So you must really love history.
Yeah, I majored in history. I wrote one novel that I thought, after all these years, every time I write something, it's like, maybe this is the one that's going to be my big break. So I wrote a novel called Albertville, which got me a New York agent, finally. And she got the book Albertville into one of the major publishing houses, to one of their major editors who loved the novel. So I thought, I could remember myself being in the shower thinking, this is it. This is it. I'm a New York agent. I'm in the publishing house. I have an editor. I'm finally going to make it. The editor had a problem with the main character. I said, okay, if I fix it, will she look at it? And they said, yes. So I did what I thought would fix it. And what happened? Nothing. That was a novel, again, very different, but historical. It's about a young Black girl who is raised up in Alabama in the 1940s and 50s. She witnesses her brother being killed by the Klan. She's sent north to live with a grandmother in Boston. She ends up going to Harvard, going for a PhD when she's recruited by the CIA in 1960 to go to the Congo, which has just gained its independence from Belgium.
Mm.
Patrice Lumumba is the prime minister, and her job is to get in good with Lumumba. But this is the height of the Cold War, and the Americans are feeling that Lumumba is a communist. So this was, to me, this was a novel of racism. The editor of the publishing house wanted me to change the novel as if it were like a British spy novel. That was the problem.
Mm.
But these
think-
are things that I hope, if the door opens for me, that I can bring back out.
Mm.
One scene that I'm very proud of, and that Albertville was, and it's called Albertville because there's a city in Alabama called Albertville, and there's a city in the Congo called Albertville. But there's a scene where this young woman approaches Lumumba, and he says to her, if anybody should support me, it's your people,
Mm.
the Americans. And she says, my people will kill you.
Mm.
And which is what ended up happening.
Mm.
So I've got a lot of stuff out there, which is just waiting for something good to happen.
Mm.
So
Do you have
this
anything
is
else?
just one kind of marketing now.
Peter, do you have anything else you'd like to read to us in the last 15?
I don't know. I don't know how much time do I have.
A little bit more than 10 minutes.
Well, if I can move over here and grab. Very briefly, I suppose I can read the opening to The Unwanted, which is the novel that is out right now.
Mm.
Sure.
It's at Lala Books in Lowell and Barnes and Noble. And I'll just start reading. You can tell me when to stop. Late summer, the first day of September to be precise. And to a young girl about to die, time running out matters above everything. In the past, on a fine day such as this girl, now hunched over her notepad in the back seat of a BMW, might have visited a museum in Berlin. She might have cross-bred flowers with her grandmother, studied her precious textbooks, hiked through a native Bavarian forest looking for plant samples. But this first day of September in 1939 is an unusual day. At 4:45 a.m. this very morning, the German army under General von Rundstedt and General von Bock have invaded Poland. World War II has begun. Does she even care, this girl? She's only 14 years old. Mind on lockdown till she noticed the forests passing by on either side of her grandfather's car. The war is distant. Turbulence at home is daily. Does she hear the radio playing, already touting the magnificence of De Fuhrer's lightning strike? Does she hear her grandfather's satisfied grunt? Hitler is right. Fire and iron is making Germany great again. Or catch his eye as he darts a worried look toward the female creature whose blood he denies is akin to his. No, she's too intent on her notepad to notice anything. Writing with a manic intensity that neither of her male attendants understands, she is bent over her paper as if some weight is forcing her down, never taking her eyes off of her work, keeping her creations a secret from the world. Ich weiß etwas, ich weiß etwas. She mumbles this rhythmic chant over and over, ich weiß etwas, until her grandfather, Friedrich, can no longer tolerate it and turns the knob of the radio to raise the sound, to drown out her existence. She's crazy, this one, her grandfather is thinking. Not of my blood. I have a clear conscience about this. Not of my blood. Her name is Hannah Ziegler. And while she does have a family, grandparents and two uncles, Edward and Walter, she is very much alone in the world. Mother deceased, father unknown, she has borne her existence through her intellect, her studies of a world that her family apparently does not want her to inhabit much longer. Her lone suitcase sits at her feet, her few possessions thrown in her at the last minute. Papers, school books, knotted pencils, an eraser, and a sharpener. The sun had barely risen 3 hours earlier when she was roasted from her bed by her family's maid, Hilda. Money is not the problem for the Ziegler. Hannah is. I don't know if you want me to go on, or
Yeah.
I'll read the conclusion. Kerner's attention, Kerner's her psychiatrist, has briefly been diverted to a van passing along the other side of the road. It has come from Hollandschloss. It is empty now. In a few days, it won't be. Gas enters through a hose. The passengers never leave their seats. How will they do it? You know what I mean. Ziegler prods Kerner. The grandfather, the patriarch of a very rich family, is utterly tactless. Kerner pretends not to understand. He looks back at Hannah with a smile. Your grandfather means, how will we process the paperwork at Hollandschloss? We Germans love bureaucracy, but time is of the essence, and we don't want to keep you waiting forever. At Hollandschloss, our motto is quick and painless. If anything, Kerner's attempt at making light of Ziegler's contempt for Hannah has only ratcheted up the girl's response. Her writing hand is now moving so quickly over her notepad, it's a wonder she doesn't tear a hole through it and send the tip of her pencil into her leg. Her chant has become an annoying drone, the buzzing of an angry hive of bees locked inside the car, windows rolled down, with three anxious people vying to escape. Who is mad now? Kerner says, I was in your room at the Institute the other day, Hannah. It's really quite nice. On the second floor with a balcony view, neat, clean, you'll have a roommate, Siggy. She's about your age, the daughter of Herr Hafner, one of our major donors. I think you might get along quite nicely, eh, Hannah? There's a window looking out onto a beautiful garden, a fountain with its statue and water bubbling out of its mouth, and flowers. Your grandmother insisted there be flowers. She grows them herself, doesn't she? Pretty flowers. The smell, even this time of year, is intoxicating. Hannah pays Kerner no mind. In fact, it appears that she's about to burst, her shaking body ready to explode into smoke and flame. But Kerner, unlike the muttering older man, persists with nonchalance. We're almost there, Hannah, you see? Over the treetops, on the very top of the hill overlooking the town. You can just make out the turrets if you look. An old castle, quite elegantly turned up, I must say. A fairy tale castle for two fairy tale princesses, eh, Hannah? Not so bad. Not so bad at all. In an instant, the rocking stops. The chanting, the manic writing. Hannah freezes. If her psychotic manifestations are unsettling to the two men, her abrupt silence is worse. The wealthy, industrious Ziegler has faced down many a politician and business adversary in his time, but has no idea how to handle this 14-year-old mental deviant. Kerner, trained at the finest European university, under the tutelage of the most renowned specialists in his chosen field, has no inkling of what he has said to cause this momentum turn of events. Hannah keeps them waiting, then says, one question, Herr Dr. Kerner. Bitte. Of course, Hannah, anything. When at last she raised her eyes, the two men, much older and wiser than she, who have determined her fate without her knowledge, she does so with complete innocence. At least, that is what they believe. How will they do it? That's, and that's it. So in that scene, you don't see it all, but Hannah comes across perhaps as mentally disturbed, but in the end, very calmly, faced with what she knows is going to happen, she says to them, how will they do it? How will they kill me? So you realize there's more to this child than what the grandfather and the psychiatrist think. So it's her story. There's a murder that occurs, and you don't know the result until the last sentence, but it's Hannah's story, so it's more than just a murder mystery. How does she survive, and what is her life like?
How and where did you do your research on Hitler is one of the questions one of our listeners has.
Well, I
You said
had to get a lot of different books on the various subjects that were most appealing, that most interesting to me. So there are books on Gally Robel and Hitler's relationship, for example, and there are books written which are sort of like Hitler Youth, the young girls, the Bund Deutsche Model, that's the name of the organization, their stories. So you get to hear from their mouths what it was like to be part of that organization. So just various histories, post-war Germany, what was it like? I open up when I do a talk at libraries. I begin by saying, and this is the opening for the novel, The Unfound. We Americans tend to think, based on education, that wars have convenient beginnings and ends. The Civil War began when Fort Sumter was bombed, and ended when Grant and Lee signed a document. But we know that the Civil War is still being fought. In Germany, Americans would think that the war ended when the German Wehrmacht surrendered in May, but in fact, 2 million German women were raped in that time period, more than 2 million. 7-year-old, 70 years old, if you were in the wrong place at the wrong time, you could be raped multiple times. You could then be shot. The Russians were notorious for committing rape. They were told by their leaders, look what the Germans did to our people. You are now free to do whatever you want. But the Americans, the British, the French also committed rape. There were also hundreds of thousands of suicides. They weren't just Nazis who wanted to avoid justice. Whole families who good people who look. We just survived 13 years of Hitler. Now we get Stalin coming in. There are stories of people who would put rocks in their pants and walk out into a pond or stream with their children and drown themselves. People would there's a story of a very famous German, well-loved German surgeon who during the war took care of all his patients, was there even when he wasn't supposed to be on duty. One day after the war, one of his friends, a doctor, the surgeon didn't show up. Well, that's unusual. So he goes to the surgeon's house, knocks on the door. There's no answer. He goes around to the window and sees the family, the whole family, sitting around a dinner table in their Sunday finest, and they've taken poison. So there were millions of homeless. There were hundreds of thousands of orphans. So Germany was a mess. And the war certainly did not end. Many Jews themselves died after those who survived the camps died because the treatment that they got was not very good. Many returned to Poland. There's a story of a town in Poland that slaughtered the Jews that returned there.
Oh, boy.
The British did not want all these Jews to go to Israel. So there were blockades. So it was a mess. And there were Nazis like Mengele and Eichmann who managed to escape with the help of the Vatican and the Red Cross. So for me, it's a prime area to set novels.
Yeah, and it was just a mess. Somebody, could you say the names of the two novels you read from again for us?
The novel that's out now is The Unwanted.
That's right.
Yeah. The novel that's coming out in December will be The Murder Investigation of Adolf Hitler. And then the one that'll come out that was postponed, it'll come out next year, will be the Unfound.
Right. So, Anna, keep your eye on our bookstore.
Yeah.
This is
here's hoping.
Thank you so much for joining us and for being here and reading your novels and talking about the value of history, actually. And nothing is in nice, neat packages, right? It bleeds over, just as our lives go from the moment we're born until we're dead, and it all bleeds together. There's no little packages.
And we can definitely learn lessons from the past, because I think we are, as there was at the end of Burns's Civil War documentary, a young Black woman historian says that if the Civil War was a battle between two armies facing across one another against the field, then the war ended at Appomattox. But if it was about something about human relationships, then that war is still being waged, and regretfully, we could still lose it.
Right. That is very true. Yes. Well, thank you very much for all of this. And I'm trying to get something up for people. Here we go. So if you like Peter's books, you can find them at our bookstore right here. This is bookshop.org/shop/Drakeit and we'll put up his new books when they come out. Also, please, we'd like to thank our many donors for making this program possible. Without them, we couldn't do any of this. Please consider being a donor yourself. You can help us continue this by going to DRAKEITARTS.com/donate. To receive more information about our Art Saturdays and other programs, please email us at drakeitarts@gmail.com or just go to our website, drakeitarts.com. This program and all of our programs are archived on Drake Arts' YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/@DrakeItArts. Thank you so much for joining us today. This has been great.
Thank you very much.